They whispered about it in hushed tones. Between classes. At the far end of the hallway where the lights always flickered. It was a story most students claimed they didn't believe in, but still repeated. A school like ours, old and sprawling, with half its buildings dating back to the 1950s, is a perfect breeding ground for urban legends. Yet this particular legend stood out because, unlike other ghost stories, no one ever laughed it off. The 13th Classroom, a mysterious room that didn't appear on the school's official map, said to be hidden somewhere deep in the oldest wing. Students who wandered inside after hours were never the same. Some said they vanished entirely. Others claimed they came back, different. I first heard about it when I was a sophomore at Greenwood High. We had a plain suburban campus in a Midwestern town, nothing remarkable. Just a place where kids tried to survive adolescence. Still, I remember the growing tension that simmered beneath the surface of our daily routines. Over time, I discovered that those who looked for the 13th Classroom often ended up regretting it. By my senior year, I was determined to find out the truth. I was the editor of the school newspaper, the Green Quill, and I wanted a story that would define my last year. Something bigger than the football team's losing streak or the new vending machines. The rumors about the 13th Classroom had flared up again after a junior named Melissa vanished without explanation, leaving only a scattered set of notes hinting at something secretive she'd been investigating. I told myself I would uncover the truth, rationalizing that it would be just another silly rumor. But deep down, I felt fear. Because, as I soon learned, some urban legends hide a disturbing reality that words can't easily explain. The first time I really took the legend seriously was when I spoke to Chris, Melissa's best friend. We met after school in the library's far corner. Chris was pale, hands trembling, speaking in a whisper so quiet I had to lean in close. "It's real," Chris said, voice cracking. "Melissa found something. She said she was close to figuring out where the classroom might be. She said it appears under certain conditions, like after a specific time, or maybe when the halls are empty. She joked it might have its own hidden door. But then she started having nightmares." I pressed for details. "Nightmares about what?" Chris looked at the floor. "She talked about seeing old desks, rotten and broken, and a chalkboard with no writing. She said she heard sobbing behind the walls. But the worst part, she claimed that inside the 13th Classroom, time didn't move normally. The bell never rang. She felt trapped, like it existed outside of everything." Melissa had disappeared 1 week after telling Chris all this. "What's the official story?" I asked. "The police had come. I knew that much." Chris shook their head. "Police say she ran away. But I know better. She left her backpack, her coat, even her phone. She wouldn't run away without those. She was supposed to meet me in the old wing after band practice the night she vanished. That's where she went. I'm sure. Searching for the room." I left the library with a heavy heart. Melissa's disappearance was unsolved. Rumors were swirling. Parents whispered at PTA meetings. The administration tried to hush it up. But students talked. They always do. That evening, I combed through old yearbooks in my bedroom, searching for any mention of unusual rooms. The older yearbooks, from the 1970s and 80s, showed a slightly different floor plan. There was a corridor that no longer existed, remodeled in the early 90s. Could the 13th Classroom be part of that forgotten space? The next day, I lingered after classes ended. The school's oldest wing was rarely used now. Just a few storage rooms and a locked door labeled maintenance. As I crept down the hallway, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. My sneakers squeaked on the worn tiles. At the far end was a boarded-up doorway I'd never noticed before. As I approached, I felt someone watching. I spun around. A janitor stood at the end of the hall. An older man with tired eyes. I'd never really noticed him before. He stepped closer and spoke softly. "You shouldn't be poking around here," he said. Voice low and serious. "Go home." I tried to act casual. "I'm just looking for a story for the school paper." "I heard rumors." He cut me off. "Rumors are dangerous. There's nothing back here you want to find." His intensity rattled me. Why would a janitor care? Is it about the missing girl? His jaw tightened. He hesitated, then sighed, shoulders slumping as if under a heavy burden. "I've worked here long enough to know the stories. The 13th Classroom is an old legend. Many years ago, a teacher supposedly died in a room that no longer exists. Some say the school tried to erase that room from the plans, but it never truly vanished. It remains in between. Occasionally, people stumble into it. They don't always come back." I felt a chill run through me. But how could a room just disappear? He shrugged. "Looking haunted. Some say the teacher was involved in something dark, cursed objects, or strange experiments. Others claim it's just a tragedy imprinted on the building's bones. Whatever it is, the room is hungry." I wanted to ask more, but he waved me away, whispering, "Don't tempt fate. Go home." Shaken, I retreated. That night, I dreamt of endless hallways and doors that led nowhere. Voices whispering my name as I wandered, lost and alone, determined to understand. I visited the local library. The school's public records might hold clues. I found references to a teacher who died decades ago, Ms. Holloway, a literature teacher rumored to have been strict and reclusive. According to old newspapers, Ms. Holloway disappeared under mysterious circumstances in 1963. Some articles hinted that she'd locked herself in a classroom late at night, grieving something unknown, and was never seen again. No body was found. The room she taught in was supposedly sealed during a renovation the following decade. Oddly, I found conflicting reports of how many classrooms that wing originally had. Some documents listed 12 rooms, others 13, as if the records themselves were unsure. By candlelight that evening, a power outage made my house eerily dark. I read Melissa's old notes. Chris had given me copies. Melissa wrote about odd phenomena, hearing footsteps in empty hallways, temperature drops near certain doors, a faint scent of chalk dust and rot. She suspected the 13th Classroom appeared late at night, perhaps at exactly 11:13 p.m., and only if you approached from a particular angle or through a certain sequence of corridors. She mentioned a door that looked plain one moment and vanished the next. I realized what I must do. If Melissa tried and failed to return, I had to be more careful. I'd bring a flashlight, maybe rope to mark my path, and my camera. I'd try to find this elusive room, document it, solve the mystery. If I succeeded, maybe I could find Melissa or at least bring closure. It wasn't easy to sneak into the school after dark. I waited until a Friday night. The building was quiet, no janitors, no evening clubs. I entered through a side door that didn't lock properly, my flashlight being cut through the darkness, revealing familiar hallways turned strange by silence and shadow. The old wing lay ahead. I followed Melissa's notes and the partial map I'd pieced together from old yearbooks. She believed the route involved taking 3 left turns past the storage closets, then a right at the old trophy case, and finally walking straight where the corridor seemed to end. I memorized these instructions, heart pounding as I stepped into darkness few had dared to tread. The air felt stale. My footsteps echoed. At one point, I heard a soft sobbing sound. But when I paused and listened, it vanished. Eventually, I found the boarded-up doorway I'd seen before. Now, the boards were gone, as if never there. Instead, a plain wooden door stood slightly ajar, lightless interior beyond. I checked my watch, 11:12 p.m. I swallowed hard. Had Melissa's guess been correct? I waited, heart in my throat, until the minute hand clicked to 11:13 p.m. Then I pushed the door open and entered. At first, I saw only darkness. My flashlight revealed a small classroom. Old-fashioned desks arranged in neat rows. The desks were wooden, carved with initials and strange symbols. A chalkboard at the front was blank, but cracked. Dust motes swirled in the air, and the smell of decay made me gag. The door clicked shut behind me. I turned back, no handle on this side. Panic surged. I tried to remain calm, shining my light around. The room felt larger than it looked, as if the corners stretched away into shadow. "Melissa?" I called softly. No answer. I approached the teacher's desk. An old-fashioned lamp and a single book lay on it. The book's title was faded, unreadable. I flipped it open, blank pages, except for one line scrawled in shaky handwriting: "Time loops in silent halls. Feed me your fear." I shuddered and backed away. My reflection in the window, I looked pale, terrified. But wait, there was no window in this room. Just a surface that half reflected me. I realized it was no window at all, but another chalkboard painted over. Or maybe a mirror dulled by grime. The silence pressed on my ears, and I heard faint whispering again, a child's voice. A woman's sob. A scraping sound. Suddenly, a desk in the back row creaked, as if someone sat down. I shone my flashlight there. Empty. Yet I felt watched. I needed to document this. I pulled out my phone. No signal. Battery draining fast. I tried to snap a photo, but the screen flickered, showing only static. My flashlight dimmed too, as if the room drank its energy. My heart thundered. I moved slowly toward the back of the room. My footsteps sounded muffled, like walking through thick carpet, though the floor was bare tile. I passed desks carved with initials, some I recognized. MG. Could that be Melissa's? Her initials were Melissa Garson. I ran my fingers over the carving. It felt fresh, as if done recently. A soft voice behind me. "Are you lost?" I spun, flashlight trembling. I saw a figure at the front of the room, a woman in a long skirt and cardigan, hair in a tight bun, face shadowed. She stood by the teacher's desk, motionless. "Who are you?" I managed, voice shaking. "I'm Miss Holloway," she said, her tone soft but hollow. "You've come searching, haven't you? You want to understand this place. You want to find her. The one who came before." I swallowed. "Melissa. Where is she?" The teacher stepped forward. Her feet didn't make a sound. As she moved into my flashlight beam, I saw her face was pale, eyes sunken and dark. She smiled, but it was a broken, sorrowful expression. Curious minds wander in here from time to time. They seek answers, but this classroom doesn't give answers freely. I stepped back, every nerve screaming to run, but the door was gone. "What do you want?" She sighed, as if burdened. "I was once a teacher here. Long ago. I loved literature, loved guiding young minds. But tragedy struck. I became trapped in this space, not quite dead, not alive. The school tried to forget me, to wall off this room, but it lingers between worlds. It needs sustenance. You see, our fears, our hopes, our time. I trembled, thinking of Melissa. If you heard her. Miss Holloway raised a hand, silencing me. It's not about hurting. It's about claiming. Those who enter rarely leave unchanged. She came looking for me. She's here. Somewhere. Her eyes flicked to a corner of the room. You can take her place. If you wish. My flashlight dimmed further. I could barely see now. Take her place? The teacher approached slowly. This room is hungry. It needs someone to keep it tethered. To feed on their memories. Their fears. I've grown old and weary here. Sustained by those unfortunate enough to wander in. But I tire of this role. I can pass it on. If you refuse, you may vanish into these shadows. Lost forever. My mind raced. Did Melissa refuse and vanish? Or did she become trapped as Miss Holloway's replacement? No, I said. Voice trembling. I won't. She tilted her head. Disappointed. Then you must face the consequences. I bolted toward where the door had been. Feeling the walls. Smooth. Cold plaster. No doorknob. I yelled for help. My voice echoed strangely. As if in a vast chamber. Miss Holloway's voice drifted closer. This place exists outside normal time. Shouting is pointless. I refused to give up. I groped along the walls, hoping for a loose board or hidden latch. My hand found something, a crack. I pulled, and a piece of plaster fell away, revealing darkness beyond. I peered in, another corridor, dimly lit by distant light. Desperate, I squeezed through the gap, scraping my arms. On the other side was a narrow hallway lined with old lockers. I recognized them, the lockers from our old yearbook photos. From decades before. Dust caked their surfaces. No sound but my ragged breathing. I staggered forward. Flashlight flickering. At the end of this corridor, a door stood ajar. I hurried to it, heart leaping. Could this be the exit? I stepped through and found myself back in the same classroom. The desks. The chalkboard. Miss Holloway waiting. She shook her head. There are no simple exits. Each door leads back here. In some way. I sank to my knees. Tears threatening. What do you want from me? To choose, she said gently. Surrender and become the next guardian of this room. Or fade into its corners like so many others. I thought of Melissa. What happened to Melissa? Miss Holloway's expression softened. She gestured to a desk in the front row. There sat Melissa. Head down. Unmoving. I rushed over, shining my dim light. Melissa's eyes were open but vacant. Her body rigid. Like a statue. She breathed. Barely. But didn't respond. Her skin felt cold. She refused. And now the room feeds on her. Over time, she'll become part of it, just another presence. A voice in the halls. My stomach twisted. I couldn't let that happen to me. I had to save Melissa. Could I free her by taking her place? Or was that a trick? I faced Miss Holloway. Voice shaky. If I become this room's guardian, what happens? She studied me. You remain here, anchoring it. Your life outside will vanish. You'll keep the cycle going, luring in those who seek the 13th classroom. The room will feed off your memories, hollowing you out, leaving only enough for you to continue existing. I recoiled. That was not a life. Just an eternal imprisonment. What if I break the cycle? I asked. Anger flaring. What if I destroy this room? She smiled sadly. Many have tried. The room is older than my presence. It's a wound in the school's fabric, opened by tragedy and sealed by secrecy. To destroy it, you'd need to sever its source. I thought of the teacher's old tragedy. Miss Holloway, your pain created this? She looked away. Pained. I lost a student dear to me. In my grief and anger at the school for failing her, I performed a ritual, foolish, desperate. I wanted to preserve her memory, her presence. Instead, I trapped myself and birthed this cursed space. Over time, I became part of it. Tears welled in my eyes. The cruelty of it all. If I find a way to forgive and let go, can I break it? The teacher's eyes widened. Forgiveness? She sounded uncertain, as if the concept were foreign now. I took a trembling breath. You created this nightmare from grief. But maybe it can end if you release that grief. If you let your student's memory rest. The room grew colder. The desks rattled. Miss Holloway's face twisted with sorrow and rage. Don't speak of release, she hissed. This room sustains me. Without it, I am nothing. A violent wind stirred inside the classroom. Papers flew. Desks scraped. I shielded my face. The flashlight died, plunging us into near darkness. Only a strange phosphorescent glow from the chalkboard provided faint light. I heard whispers, children crying, teachers scolding, the shuffle of feet. Shadows stretched on the walls, forming shapes of students, teachers, corridors. They flickered like old film strips. I crawled toward Melissa, grabbing her wrist. Melissa, wake up, I pleaded. No response, but I felt a slight pulse. Miss Holloway loomed over us. You will not break this cycle. Her voice layered with multiple tones, as if many voices spoke through her. I thought about what the janitor said. This place was hungry. Fear fed it. I was terrified. But maybe if I stood firm, refused to give it what it craved, my terror, my despair, I could weaken it. I rose to my feet, legs shaking. I'm not afraid of you. I lied, forcing steady words. You're just a tragedy trapped in time. I won't let you take me. She hissed, stepping back as if struck. The room's walls shimmered. For a moment, I saw the real hallway behind one wall, the school's corridor. Dim exit signs glowing. I clung to that vision. This isn't real. You have no power if I don't submit. I dared to take a step forward, challenging her. Let Melissa go. Miss Holloway's face contorted. She raised her hands, and I felt an invisible force pushing me down. My knees hit the floor hard. Pain sliced through me, but I refused to scream. I gritted my teeth. You can't hold me forever. A crack in the ceiling, a moan in the floorboards. The classroom was unstable. Perhaps it depended on fear and resignation to maintain itself. If I resisted with all my might, maybe I could break free. I grasped Melissa's arm and pulled. She was heavier than normal, as if made of stone. I whispered to her, reminding her of who she was, recalling her laughter, her kindness. My voice was choked but determined. Melissa, you were never meant to be here. Wake up. For a second, I thought I saw her blink. Miss Holloway shrieked, a sound that rattled the desks. Shadows swirled, clawing at me. I felt them tugging at my memories, trying to drain me of resolve. I focused on something dear to me, my family waiting at home, my younger sister depending on me, my dreams of becoming a journalist. I poured that energy into pulling Melissa from her trance. I refused to be lost here. With a groan, Melissa stirred. Her eyes fluttered, confusion flooding her gaze. Where? She muttered weakly. Miss Holloway screamed, voice breaking. You dare to steal my sustenance? You'll pay with your life. The floor trembled. I lost my footing, dragging Melissa along. A crack opened in the wall, revealing a sliver of the real hallway outside, the one from my time. My reality. Come on, I gasped, tugging Melissa. She struggled to stand. We stumbled toward the crack in the wall. Behind us, Miss Holloway rushed forward, arms outstretched, nails scraping the air, eyes burning with desperate hunger. At the last moment, I turned and shouted, I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Holloway. But holding on to this pain only creates more suffering. Let it go. She hesitated, shock flickering in her hollow eyes. That hesitation gave us enough time. I pushed Melissa through the crack, then followed. We tumbled out into the hallway, our hallway, with modern lockers and fluorescent lights humming softly. My watch showed it was just after midnight. The school was dark and empty, but real. I tasted normal air, felt solid ground. Melissa lay beside me, weak but alive. I helped her up. Are we safe? She asked, voice trembling. I think so, I whispered. We both turned to look at the wall behind us. It was solid brick. No door, no crack, just a normal, mundane wall. I exhaled shakily. We'd escaped the 13th classroom. I had confronted Miss Holloway and somehow, through willpower and empathy, broken free. Yet I knew we were lucky. If I hadn't risked trying to save Melissa, I might have ended up trapped forever. We made our way out of the school. No alarms sounded. Outside, the chilly night air slapped our faces. We stumbled onto the sidewalk, tears mixing with relief. Melissa thanked me repeatedly. I just hugged her, grateful we survived. We agreed to keep the truth quiet. Who would believe us anyway? The school needed no more tragedy. We decided to say she had out at a friend's place, that she'd been upset but was fine now. The details would be murky, but better than trying to explain this impossible story. The next Monday at school, things seemed normal. Students gossiped about Melissa's return. Some said she had run away and thought better of it. The administration let it go. Relieved no scandal emerged. Chris cried happy tears to see Melissa safe. I made up some half-truth to soothe their worries. I tried to move on, but strange things nagged at me. Occasionally, when I passed the old wing, I felt a slight chill. Once, I thought I heard a faint sob. The janitor caught my eye and nodded, a silent understanding passing between us. Perhaps he knew we had survived a brush with the impossible. Then, one afternoon, I found a note slipped into my locker. It said, "Thank you." No signature. The handwriting was old-fashioned, elegant. I recognized it as Miss Holloway's from the book in that classroom. My spine tingled. Could she still reach us somehow? Over the next weeks, I tried to reassure myself it was over. Melissa slowly recovered, though she had nightmares about empty desks. I focused on finishing my senior year, eager to leave Greenwood High behind. But 2 nights before graduation, I woke at 3 a.m. to find a piece of old chalk on my desk at home. I never brought any chalk home. Written faintly on the surface of my desk, "It never truly ends." I gasped, flipping on the lights. The writing was gone. No trace. Perhaps just my imagination. Years passed. I went off to college, got a journalism degree, moved to another state. I rarely thought of Greenwood High. When I did, I assumed the 13th classroom lay dormant, sealed by our confrontation. But one summer, while visiting my hometown, I decided to walk past the old school for nostalgia's sake. The building looked the same, maybe more rundown. I ventured close to the old wing's exterior wall, drawn by a strange compulsion. As I stood there, a cool breeze ruffled my hair. I noticed faint scratch marks on the bricks, as if something inside had tried to reach out. My heart pounded. My reflection in a nearby window showed a tired adult, older and supposedly wiser. That's when I saw it, behind me. In the reflection stood Miss Holloway's figure, her face calm. She reached out, placing a ghostly hand on my shoulder in the glass. I whirled around. No one there. Yet I felt a presence. A voice in my mind whispering, "You took Melissa away from me. You left me alone. The room still exists, waiting. It might find another way in. Or perhaps it will follow you." I stumbled back, terrified. How could it follow me? This was supposed to be over. In the reflection, I now saw not just Miss Holloway, but also desks and a chalkboard behind her, superimposed over the real world. The 13th classroom's image lingered in the glass, faint but undeniable. Realization hit me like ice water. By rescuing Melissa and refusing the role, I might have freed us, but I never destroyed the room. I only angered it, forced it to adapt. It could still reach out, find cracks in reality. It might appear in another school, another place, hunting for someone else to sustain it. My chest tightened. I felt something tug at my memory, as if trying to pull me back into that timeless space. I ran, heart pounding, leaving the old school behind. But I knew I could never truly escape. I write this now in a panic, decades after the event. Sometimes, in unfamiliar buildings, I turn a corner and swear I glimpse a door that shouldn't exist, a door that vanishes when I blink. At night, I dream of Miss Holloway's sorrowful eyes, of Melissa's empty stare, of dusty desks and silent chalkboards. I wake gasping for breath, expecting to find myself trapped inside that impossible room. And I know that someday, when my guard is down, the 13th classroom may claim me. Because it's not just about a single school building or a single tragedy. It's a hungry legend that thrives on fear and confusion. It lives in the spaces we can't explain, in the hush of empty halls. It waits quietly, patiently, for the next curious soul to open the wrong door at the wrong time. When that happens, I fear no amount of courage or compassion will save them. For some legends never die, they just change shape and wait, hungry and silent, for their next victim.